Hey everyone. Uh, my name is Greg. I am the host of the Meadows and Makers podcast. And this week I have done a recording of the podcast. And so I'm going to kick it off and get started with further explaining some of the beginnings of a presentation for teaching natural law. And so this episode, I have a great guest on. It's one of my good buddies, and we talked about solar power and getting started with solar. And so it's a really great interview for anybody out there that's looking to create their own solar power system. And so that's coming up on the show. But first off, I just wanted to get into some more of teaching natural law. And I have a presentation that was given by Mark Passio uh, that I've been working through, and uh, right now we're just getting into some of the basics and starting off on understanding what natural law is, and some of the reasons why it's important. And one of the big reasons why I think it's important for everybody to understand natural law is because we all need a foundation to start on. The world is quite or it can be chaotic if we don't understand what's going on and understand that there is a construction for this physical existence. And that's what natural law is. There is a rule set that is inherent in nature that commands the outcomes of decisions that beings with uh, our level of consciousness are subjected to. And so many people can consider that to be something like karma. You can think of it as karma. So, if you do bad things, you're going to get that right back at you, because this universe is actually a reflection of our eternal self, I believe. It's actually, if you listen um, to some people, one of the guys I listen to is Max Egan, and he talks about how the universe is a reflection or a mirror of our eternal state, and I really think that that is the case, just from my own personal life. And so yeah, I want to get more into this presentation of natural law and just kind of go over a few of those things that were went over in the previous couple of recordings of the podcast. And so I'd like to share this presentation with y'all right now. And so I'm pulling it up here. Um, so let's get this going here. So in the previous two podcasts, we talked about the meaning of the word occult, which is simply means hidden. And the reason why it's so important to understand these things that are hidden, because that differential between the knowledge of what is hidden by a certain group of people is actually used against everybody else. So without our having this knowledge, it creates this power differential. And so um, that's this part right here that I was getting into at the last part of the podcast, is that um, trying to understand, trying to explain the difference or the meaning of the word occult. And then we went over the definitions of nescience and ignorance. And so um, here's part that of that, and understanding this knowledge If human beings as a species do not have the things they say they want, it follows logically that the knowledge of the requirements to obtaining these things they say they want either must be absent, or if present, that knowledge must be willfully ignored. As long as this knowledge continues to remain unknown or ignored, the manifestation of desired conditions will be impossible. So this is why it is so fundamental to this have this knowledge, or try to obtain the knowledge which has been occulted. And that ultimately is the knowledge of natural law, that there is inherent in this reality, that there is a system built in to govern the consequences of actions of beings with our capability of consciousness, and it governs the outcomes of our actions. And so this fundamental knowledge gives us a base foundation to stay rooted in truth about what's going on in our current world. And so in in that reason, I think is highly important. Just to go over what has already been discussed, the word occult is derived from the Latin adjective occultus, hidden, which comes from the Latin verb occultare, to keep, to hide, or to conceal, to keep secret. So, as you can see, that hidden knowledge that's held just by the few people at the top of this pyramid, they hold a power differential over the ignorance of the rest of us. And so, by us attaining this knowledge, it levels that playing field. We don't have to keep playing, and we don't have to keep playing the same games over and over again. We can actually see behind the veil, and we can know the games will be playing on us and not buy into it. So occult knowledge constitutes both of the knowledge of human consciousness and how it operates, and then the knowledge of natural law, which is, as I've described, the unseen universal spiritual laws which govern the consequences of human behavior. That karma thing, how people, suggest there is karma, the wheel of karma. And, this is the underlyings to our physical universe. So it is exactly not commonly known because it has been deliberately hidden in order to maintain a power differential between those that hold the knowledge and those who are ignorant of it. That's why it's so important to understand this and get this foundation. The knowledge of natural law and its operations constitutes the most deeply occulted information on earth, which the powers that be seek to keep hidden from all the people of earth at all costs, because its understanding would actually level the playing field and put those currently entrenched systems of control out of business. So this is what we got into. So nescience is simply the meaning of nescience is to not know because the knowledge was absent or unobtainable. You couldn't get it. You didn't have access to the internet or something like that. You can't actually figure out what's actually happening in the world through other means, through various means. Ignorance comes from the Latin verb ignorare, which means to not know, even though the necessary information is present, because that information has been willfully refused or disregarded. That is the majority of people that are hanging around. And I know in my conversations between friends and people that are somewhat close to me, friends and family members, you try to get into some of these things and try to tell some people about what's really happening in the world, and the knowledge that they need to get into, especially looking into all the false flag events and things that have gone on in the past, and why the whole system as it stands is just a complete farce, and even if you give it some legitimacy, then if you think it has any legitimacy and you don't look into it, then uh, you're remaining ignorant, depending on no matter how much information you give somebody else, uh, they choose to stay willingly ignorant that this information is out there. And so that is the state of the world that we're in. And things won't get better until we start actually doing the work to look into these things and start to understand and start to gain the knowledge. So this is it. Most people are asleep. They're hypnotized by the mainstream media and what they're being programmed to believe. And until people wake up and start to look into the reason, the fundamental core reason why the earth is in the state that it is, we will be subjected to uh, just a repeated boot pounding on our faces until eternity. So this is the reason why I wanted to start getting into this and actually start to share this knowledge with others, because I believe it is completely fundamental for how we can move forward into a positive future. We have to have a solid foundation. Every building needs a solid foundation, otherwise it'll crumble. And so that's where we see the state of our society right now. It's crumbling before our very eyes, and really people have fallen out of the ability to understand true morality, and that it is not subjective. Morality is not subjective in this world. It is an objective truth. There is objective truth in this world, and it was set out by the creator, the universal consciousness, however you want to think about it. But there is an underlying nature to how everything operates in this reality. And you can see it by testing it out yourself in life. So go out there and be a piece of crap to other people and see what happens to you. On the other hand, if you're going out and you're trying to live your purpose in accordance to the truth and to right livelihood, you'll see things wildly come in your direction. You'll meet the right people. You'll have these interesting synchronicities coming your way, and it's just because you're in alignment with the true creation, I believe. And so these are some things to consider and things that everybody should be looking into. And so I hope to be uh, somebody that can bring you this information, and I will continue to bring this information forth in my content and in different ways. So appreciate y'all's time, and we're going to move into the rest of the podcast recording. And thank you all for listening. And I'll catch you on my next week's show for the Meadows and Makers podcast, where I try to bring on people that are living a more self-reliant lifestyle and looking to manifest a brighter future for ourselves and our loved ones. So, all right, everybody, welcome to the podcast today. And this is a good friend of mine that is coming on the show, and we met through some interesting circumstances in the and some stuff that was going on in the city of Huntsville that was going on to him. And so if he likes, he'll get into that. But big into living off grid, and he's got a bunch of solar panels that power his house, and he's got all kinds of he's collecting rainwater and doing the off-grid thing. And so his name's Tyler. And how's it going, Tyler? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you taking the time out to come on and chat with me. So what I usually do on the podcast is I have everybody that comes on the show, kind of tell us a little bit about who you are and, a little bit about your background. And Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, like you said, my name is Tyler Truitt, and I do live off grid, but I guess kind of the story of how I got here and why I got here maybe is what I should tell you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
when I
How did that all happen? How did that all come together?
when I got out of the Marine Corps, I was out in California, and I'd spent about a year out there after I got out because I was working on an associate's degree at the community college out there, and I had started my college experience at UAH in Huntsville before I was in the Marine Corps, and so I always kind of thought, well, let me just go back when I go back home to Alabama. I'll just go back to UAH and I can finish up my bachelor's degree there since I already have credits and stuff. And so I knew I was going to be using my GI Bill and stuff. I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice if I had somewhere to live that basically was completely debt free with no bills to worry about? That way, if I didn't, wouldn't have to get a job necessarily, and I could just basically focus on school first and foremost, because it seems like that was kind of, one of my downfalls, like, earlier, the first time that I tried to go to college, is like you end up like working so much and everything, just trying to like pay bills and keep up with stuff so that you don't go, completely up to your eyes in debt.
Yeah.
That, that becomes your first priority and not actually focusing on school.
Okay.
So I was like,
So you were
I had
working
a
on
little bit of,
you were working on a degree before you entered into the Marine Corps.
yeah, I had finished about a year's worth of a physics degree, and that's what I'm actually about to finish this year.
Oh, okay.
So
Awesome.
So yeah, that was kind of the idea. Is I had a little bit of money saved up, and I was like, you know what? When I get back to Alabama, I think I can find somewhere to live that I can just get by with this little bit of money and just like buy me a piece of property and like have a house or something, and then I can just try to basically make it off grid and basically live with as little as possible, and try to just like live within my means, not really have any kind of bills to have to worry about.
Yeah.
So. And basically that's what I did. I came out here, and I kind of had a job lined up already before I got here that was full time anyway. But I was like, let me just go ahead and and try to pursue this and see what I can find. And found a piece of property inside the city for a few $1,000s, like a 2-acre property. It was in a pretty secluded area, so I was like, okay, this is good. Nobody's really probably going to bother me here.
Yeah.
And
How
ended
how
up
mu- how, mu- how
getting a.
much property was it?
It's about 2 acres.
Okay.
So ended up getting a mobile home really cheap. It's just it was like a used early, like 1990, like 80 foot by 16 single wide.
Yeah.
So I got it for literally like almost nothing,
Wow.
and had it moved out here to the property and stuff. And I was like, it. And it was it was at the end of the road where there wasn't a house here before, so there wasn't any utility pole or anything here anyway. So even if I wanted to hook power up to it, I would have spent several $1,000s at the minimum just to get an extra power pole put in. They probably would have had to put 2 or
Oh,
3. So
okay.
it's like, all right, at that point, it's like, yeah, let me just go with my plan and just try to hook all this up on solar. And
That,
it's something I've been learning about basically just through the internet and through YouTube and seeing what other people were doing. And because of my background in electronics, I was like, yeah, this is nothing I can't handle. So
okay.
I just basically just like went for it and just like got some solar panels and some batteries and like the basic components I needed and just started using it.
Okay. Yeah, so you kind of just learned on the fly as you were putting it together and just learning through videos and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, that's something that I talk about on the show is that once you can understand kind of the fundamental concepts of something, you can kind of make things up on the fly as you go, or make up whatever in the system. And so you think that having that background in electronics kind of gave you the confidence to take it on.
Yeah, I think having that does kind of give you a little bit more confidence. I know some people are, because really, you learn best by doing, but a lot of people are kind of afraid to take that first step because
Oh
they're
yeah,
worried
yeah,
about, they're either gonna like break something or whatever. Just like the same as working on your car. A lot of people don't want to. It's stuff that you could fix it yourself, but they would rather just take it to a mechanic because they're afraid they're going to break it. But you just
right.
have, once you get past that initial fear of like, oh, something's going to go wrong, and you just start doing it, like you realize that it's not really that hard. I mean, yeah, you probably will make mistakes, but it's nothing that you can't, overcome. At least for me, it hasn't been. So I just
Yeah,
kind of, try to live with that philosophy. Like, just let me just learn by doing. I don't think there's anybody out there really that can, do stuff that I can't do. It's like, why pay someone else to do this? It's like when I can just, go on YouTube and find the basic information I need to get started with this on my own.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the best ways of learning, in my opinion. And for the longest time, for myself, I was kind of one of those people that I wanted to make it all perfect, and have the perfect layout, the perfect design, the perfect plan, and then execute it. Well, nothing in life is perfect, is what I found out. And the biggest hurdle for me was just getting started. And so now I have adopted that mentality myself of just getting out there and getting started. And you were actually the person that introduced me into learning more hands-on with solar. You kind of took me under your wing and showed me some stuff and showed me how to set up my first little system with that. And from there, I've just been learning more and more.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because when I first started, my little system that I had set up was far from perfect, but it was good enough. It worked, and I've adapted it and made it better and replaced certain components as I've gone on. But there's like a funny saying. It's something like, perfection is the enemy of good enough,
Yeah.
or something like that. And that's basically, most people are they're looking for like, oh, we have to make sure this is perfect and everything. If you're waiting for something to come along that's perfect, you'll probably never even get started with it. Or if you want to
Yeah.
like wait until you know every possible thing that there is to know about the subject, like you'll just never even get started with it.
Right. Yeah. And and you find that, as you get started with something, you start to gain more confidence over time. And once you're in it, you're not even once you're into the project or into the thing that you're learning or whatever, that all that fear just goes away. And then another part of it is what will other people think of me, right? Because like that was a little bit of what I had going on personally, was like, if I don't do this perfect and I show people, it's like, what are other people going to think of me? But then that's a big hurdle for a lot of people to get over
Well,
too.
hey, I mean, you can just put that behind you, from step one, because as soon as you're talking about living off the grid, they already think something's wrong with you. So, because like whenever you're doing something that's different than what everybody else is doing, they're gonna
Yep.
be like, "What in the heck is that guy doing?" I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
you're gonna attract attention to yourself. But I don't know. There's a Fallout Boy song that says, "I don't care what you think as long as it's about me." And that's kind of like, it's like, just let them see what we're doing, and like whether they like it or not, what we're doing, I think is the future.
I agree, man. I'm a big proponent of decentralizing everything and decentralizing down to our our own individual power production is one of the probably when I got into it and started playing around with solar power and producing my own energy. It is one of the most empowering things you can do with the current technology now. And it was such an empowering moment for me to take that energy and be able to store it in the batteries and then be able to convert it and be able to use it for something useful that I was doing. And at the time, it was just a refrigerator. I was just trying to run my refrigerator on it and see if I could run it off the solar power. And and then later on adapted to using it on my aquaponics system and running some things on the aquaponics system. And so it
Yeah,
was,
how did that go? Because I remember when I came over there and we plugged your fridge into that system the first time we set it up. I actually like brought some like stuff over there to help you get it hooked up.
yeah.
How long did you have your fridge plugged into those batteries?
Well, I think that we had 4 golf cart batteries, and they were around. I think it was probably a total energy storage of like 5.5 kilowatt hours or something like that. And it wouldn't totally power my batteries through the nighttime, it wouldn't totally power the refrigerator entirely through the nighttime. I believe it would cut off around like, I don't know, 6 in the morning or something like that. And but it was just I think it was 660 watts, and it was charging, those 4 golf cart batteries. And so
And were the
that
batteries getting charged up all the way?
I believe they were. Yeah, I don't think I went around and tested them all, but I believe they were getting plenty of charge during the day. And it's just that refrigerator I was using, it was really old and inefficient. So I didn't put I think I put a kilowatt meter on the refrigerator to see exactly how much it was using, but um, I don't remember what exactly the power consumption was. But I think it was
Yeah,
probably
because it seemed like I remember
800
like you
watts or so.
were having a little bit of problems with it. I couldn't think why exactly, but because we've like we're running like a regular size refrigerator and like a deep freezer chest, and they both like use like almost no power. Because when I first started out, we just had like a little mini fridge,
Yeah,
and I mean that thing used like almost nothing. And but we're like, you know what? Let's just the new fridges are pretty efficient. Let's just go get one and stuff. And like really, it wasn't a big deal. Like I
yeah.
mean, my fridge probably uses like hardly any of the power that we generate. So I mean, I don't know. It's kind of surprising to me that 4 batteries wasn't enough to keep it going all day.
It
But
was
I mean, at the same time, with it
well,
being
during the
old,
during the day it was fine, but it would cut out if it was going through the nighttime. But it was an old refrigerator. It was like from the 1980s.
oh yeah,
I
that's
was
probably
just
why.
I was just so
Well,
cheap. I was just so cheap, man. Everything in my house. I think I paid for one piece of furniture my entire time I was living at that house, and I recently moved out of that house. But I think I paid for a table and some chairs, but that was it.
yeah, I mean that's the way to be, dude. Like we've got
Yeah,
most of our furniture for free too.
yeah,
People. That's like one of the things that people are so just willing to like. They just want it gone. When they want it gone, they want it gone.
yeah, yeah.
They'll
That's
probably
how I
pay you
got.
just to come take it from them.
Yeah, that's how I got all my furniture, including a washer and dryer. I had a friend that was moving out of the state, and he needed some help getting some stuff out of his apartment. And he's just like, "Hey, you want these? You can have them." And then, so many other pieces of furniture like a couch and chair and all this stuff is all from friends that were just getting rid of their furniture because they either wanted some new stuff or they just were moving and didn't need it anymore. So yeah. And then Craigslist deals. I think I got another free thing on Craigslist, just like you're saying. Somebody just wanted out of their house, and yeah, you can get so many free things like that.
Well, and like I try to buy basically everything used if I can. Like Craigslist and eBay are pretty much like should be like your best friends if you're trying to save money and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like, the
Yeah,
one,
like definitely don't go into debt to get anything. There's always, used stuff out there for reasonably affordable prices most of the time. So
yeah, and I know, and it's like everybody. It's a mentality of a lot of people now, where it's just like, I need it, but I need it now, and I need like the nicest thing. But I remember when I was growing up, like my parents did the same thing. They just like got a free couch from a friend, or like you know, like we didn't have anything new. We were just getting everything like secondhand, and you know, you build it over time. Like you know, maybe later you can buy something new, but I mean, just starting out, like I don't see a need for having like all brand new stuff and like all this, you know, and especially if you have to go into debt to get it too.
Well, and that's crazy, you know, because really the biggest part about this lifestyle that, like I said, that really motivated me, it wasn't necessarily the energy independence or the being good for the environment or whatever. It was just the like financial freedom. Like I don't want anybody being able to hold anything over my head saying like I owe them a bill every month. You know,
Yeah,
that's what it was for me. And like what you talk about how empowering this is, it's this whole lifestyle. It is super empowering to know that like if I don't want to go to work tomorrow, I can just say screw it and not go to work tomorrow because I don't really have any bills, you know. As
yeah,
long as I have, you know, food to eat, you know, for the rest of the month or whatever, that's pretty much all that I have to worry about. Like I mean,
yeah,
I pay for a cell phone bill and my car insurance, and really those aren't even necessities. I could cut that off too if I wanted to.
yeah,
But you
yeah. I
know,
know.
my
Yeah,
car is just an old junky car. I'm like, I'm not making a payment on it. Like, who cares about having the nicest, newest car? Like, I used to have a friend in the Marine Corps that was always, he had this like, it wasn't brand new, but it was like relatively new, like a sports car, like 350Z and stuff. And he was, of course, making all these payments and stuff on it,
yeah,
and that he couldn't afford. And he was always telling me, well, you know what the coolest thing about this car is? It has this and that, and it's double turbos and just like all this like stuff. I was like, you know what the cool thing about my car is? It's actually mine. It's like I have the title for it. You don't have the title for your car. So I don't know even what car you're talking about when you say the coolest thing about my car, because that car ain't yours.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. The dealership owns it until you pay off the car.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think it actually did get taken back because he
Ah,
couldn't pay for it in the end. But
damn, yeah.
that
Yeah,
that's what happens,
so many people
people.
get caught in that trap. They wanna show off to their friends and their, you know, look at me, look at you know, I'm successful or whatever. But yeah, there's different definitions of success, and I'm on the same page as you. Is that my freedom from being harassed by somebody that wants to repossess things, or you know, I didn't make a payment or something like that, and they're gonna hold that over my head is the freedom that I want,
Yeah, and like
or
there's
the
too like there's
success, I
just
guess.
something. Yeah, there's something empowering too, also about just like living within your means and not feeling like you have to go out there and like charge up a giant mortgage or, you know, a car payment or even student loans or whatever, because I feel like our society puts so much pressure on us to like just like debt, borrow, borrow, borrow. You know, they want you to
Yeah,
borrow all this money so you can buy all their crap that you don't really even need or want, and you know,
yeah,
act like you're weird if you don't do that just because it's expected of you.
yeah, yeah. It's
So
I think I love this quote by George Carlin. He said, when you're born onto this planet, you're born into the freak show, and then if you're born in the United States, you've got a front row seat.
eh, yep, yep.
But yeah, it is, and I've talked to so many people that are, you know, they're depressed on their situation and things like that, and a lot of it is because they're not deemed successful by society standards, and they feel like they're, you know, they have to keep up with everybody else, and make all the cool Facebook posts on having fun all the time and all this stuff, and it's to me it's just a big lie. It's a trap.
And you know, the thing is, like, I'm not opposed to having material things. I mean, everybody wants to have nice stuff, but I want to have stuff that I can afford, not stuff that for one I'm going to be in debt over. But I'm certainly not going to try to go out there and play this social game where I'm like comparing myself to other people and stuff. I mean, you know, if I
Right.
want it, I'll go work for it and I'll earn it the right way and not try to borrow a bunch of money just so I can compete with people socially. Because in the end, all the joy that item or whatever is supposed to bring to you is just going to be overshadowed by all the other, just like the darkness that surrounds it, you know. I think in the end, that for most people, they find out, you know, it's just not worth it. Like you'll be much
Yeah.
happier if you just, you know, realize
Save
like,
up
okay, this is
and buy it outright when you have when you actually earned the amount that you needed to buy that thing or whatever. Don't over leverage yourself to go and try to compete with other people or whatever.
right, and then be proud of that you did that, because that's an accomplishment, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot more satisfaction in it when you know that you didn't have to charge it on your credit card or whatever to go get that thing. And yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, man. Like I don't fear being, successful monetarily or anything like that. And but yeah, it's just I hold a similar attitude to you is what that means. So amen, man.
And you know, so you know, it's funny how the interest rates keep on going down, and I mean, I'm sure you know why the interest rates keep going down. They have to, because
Yeah.
they keep trying to say, well, oh, there's, inflation isn't that bad. Well, the prices of things are going up, okay?
Yeah,
Prices of
yeah,
things are going up, and people aren't getting paid more. So the
yeah.
only way that people can maintain the same standard of living
By incurring more
is
debt or
by
taking on more
incurring
debt.
more debt.
Yeah.
And the only way they can take on more debt is when the
It's
price of the debt gets cheaper. So that's why the interest rates on, things like mortgages and stuff and car payments, whatever, have to keep going down. And I was hearing on the radio today on Marketplace, they were talking about the average period for an auto loan today is 7 years.
wow.
7 years for just to buy a car, because the prices are getting more expensive. People can only afford the same, $150, $200, whatever payment they're making every month. Well, we just have to stretch it out over more months now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I imagine, a few years from now, what's it going to be like? Oh, the average is going to be, 10 years, like you're still going to be paying on your last car, even after it's gone to the junkyard, and you're having to buy another new one. Then you're going to be making double payments.
Yeah, and that's the insidious way that inflation works is that you don't see the effects of it immediately. And so people are it's kind of a hidden thing because we have such short attention spans, I guess, and a lot of that is kind of engineered into us with the if you're watching television programming, it's called programming for a reason. And so uh you know it's it's something that is very sneaky, the inflation, and it creeps up on people, and all of a sudden they go to the grocery store and wondering why their milk is costing $20 a gallon, or not even that you should be drinking homogenized milk. Like we should be drinking raw milk from farmers that are producing raw milk, but that's illegal because it doesn't go through the U.S. Or the FDA or all the
Well,
jokers.
what's funny is like milk is one of those weird things. I think it's actually getting cheaper, at least here. I mean, maybe not in California, but here it seems like the milk is getting cheaper. And I personally don't drink milk. I never have. I've never liked it ever since
Well,
I was a kid. I don't know why, but
it's probably because of the demand of it. I think a lot more people are becoming more health conscious too, and realizing
well, you're right. A
that
lot of people are staying away from it now. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. So the demand's probably gone down, but they're still they still are cranking out the same old supply for that amount of milk or whatever that was in the past. So there's probably a lot more people becoming conscious of that because homogenized milk is like one of the worst things for you that I've learned recently.
well, yeah. I mean, like not to demonize milk. I don't really care if people drink milk or not, but the kind that you buy from the store, I mean, I'd have to look more into it, but probably for sure is not. I mean, obviously, what you're getting out of a cow is not nearly the same as what you're buying off the shelf, because it
Yeah.
does have a lot of processing done to it. And not only that, the cows aren't even they're not even natural organic cows, because they have so much like hormones and different things injected into them, and
Yeah,
different stuff is done
antibiotics
to
and
it.
growth
But
hormone. Yep.
But I mean, that's basically with all of our food now. You know, it's like nothing. It's so much more expensive to eat like raw, like real food, basically. You know, like you really can't hardly even buy real food anymore unless you just go to the farmer's market and want to, you know, cook it all yourself and stuff. Because if you're just trying to go to fast food or just like go grab something off the shelf that's like ready made or whatever, like,
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to know like what you're getting is not really real food in most cases. It's just, you know, much of processed like garbage, basically.
Yeah, because they have to put all these preservatives and things into them to keep them on the shelves for longer periods of time. So by the time you get the food, it's like pretty much devoid of any nutritional value that it once had. So yeah,
It's
it is.
funny because like an old man at school, he's like he's actually he's a professor, but he's actually like a retired professor. But he was saying something about being sick and say, well, it's like it's because you can't buy real food these days. He's like, you can't even get yogurt that has any live cultures in it anymore. Everything's pasteurized. You can't buy real
Yeah,
food. But I mean, he's right, you know,
yeah.
because
Hmm.
I mean, when our grandparents was up were kids, you know, like food was just like food basically. You know, it didn't have all the kind of processing and stuff. I mean, all that's come about. I mean, I don't know when, but for, you know, the last few decades, it's certainly gotten a lot worse.
Right. Yeah, that's a big reason, why I do what I do is because, I like to, I'm building this off grid, land into a permaculture farm. And this is where I intend to take it and try to grow food. Both, I'm gonna try to get into doing some broiler chickens. This year, and then also try to grow a majority of my food on my property, and also turn it into a permaculture food forest so that years down the line it'll keep producing for me. So um, I think that is essential now. I think it's essential to try to grow a certain portion of your own food and to start just growing little things that you can, the things that you really enjoy. If you really enjoy cucumbers, grow cucumbers. If you really enjoy peppers, grow some peppers. Just start somewhere though.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And you guys kind of got into some of that this year, right? Yeah, or this past season, the past growing season.
Yeah, we were growing a little bit of stuff. I mean, we did a lot more last year than we did this year. I'm hoping, you know, maybe next year, year after next, we can move into a better house on a bigger property and stuff,
Okay.
and start doing all that properly. You know, once I have more time to focus on it, I should, because I'll be done with school and stuff this year. So, I mean, that's kind of still what I'm. You know, I do a lot of stuff, but
Yeah.
we've got some apple trees growing that they were growing in our house like all winter long, and now we've moved them outside into the bigger pots, but we just like planted them from the seeds that we got in our apples. So I
Oh,
thought that was
cool.
kind of neat that they're growing, and it'll be interesting to find out if they actually germinate and make, or I mean, I guess the seeds already germinate, but if they will reproduce and make more apples eventually once they get to maturity.
Yeah.
Because I have heard some people have had difficulty, like their trees will grow but not produce fruit when they have some of the, because you never really know like what you're buying at the store. Like, are these apples
Well,
like
yeah.
GMO? Like, what kind of apples are they?
Yeah, that's the trick, is that some of these GMO seeds aren't able to reproduce, and that's the tricky thing that you need to look for, like heirloom and organic seeds if you can, because they'll be able to reproduce. That's one of the crazy things about the GMO stuff, is that some of these things, for Monsanto to hold the patents on them, some of them they don't reproduce. So
Yeah, they're designed to be sterile, which that I mean, it's crazy that you even have to worry about that. Is my tree going to make fruit because someone did something weird to it?
yeah,
But I mean,
yeah.
I mean, they're
That's
probably
the world
fine. They're
we live
probably
in
just
now.
regular seeds, but yeah, like you said, the fact that you even have to worry about that is just is
Yeah.
kind of astounding.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's but you know, with fruit trees with different varieties, they yeah, you know, sometimes you need two trees for them to be able to produce fruit. So that's something
Oh
to
yeah, they're cross pollinators. You do have to have multiples for
yeah.
sure. So
Yep. Yeah, so that's awesome, man. I didn't know you guys were trying to grow some trees and stuff. That's really cool. That's also
yeah, so I really want to get like basically like a little orchard and stuff when we get to our bigger property. I don't know if you know,
okay.
but Soraya's family, they actually have a pistachio farm back in California. I mean, there's some other stuff out there too, but
Oh, really?
mostly pistachios and stuff that they harvest every year.
Oh, wow, that's cool. I
Which,
didn't know that.
do you like pistachios?
Yeah, yeah, I really do. Yeah.
All right, we'll get you some pistachios.
That's awesome. I didn't know they had a farm out there. That's cool. Um yeah, man, that would be great. That'd be cool. Um yeah, so I was gonna maybe pick your brain or, you know, kind of just ask you what all you have going on your system at your house. Like, you know, maybe you could tell us a little bit about like you know, the total size of the system, and does that you know, maybe walk us through your setup.
All right, yeah. So right now I've got, let me see, I think I've got 5 strings of, yeah, so I got 5 strings of 4 panels right
Okay.
now.
Okay.
So, and they're just honestly they're just kind of a hodgepodge of different panels. They're all about, 250 watts or bigger.
Okay.
Some of them are a little bit larger. But as I went and I added, because I was just trying to source panels locally at first, and I was actually driving up to
Okay.
Tennessee to this guy to get, he was selling them off of Craigslist, and that guy was driving to Texas to get them from the factory. They were
Ah.
basically like the factory rejects,
Oh.
that because they might have had blemishes or whatever. He was like bringing them back up here
Oh,
and then
okay.
like selling them out and stuff. So I was going up there getting panels from that guy at
Okay.
first, and then, which is funny because those were American made panels. They're made in Texas, and the
Yeah.
company that actually made those is shut down now. That's one of the weird things about these. A lot of the solar companies, especially the ones that crop up in the United States, is that
A
they'll
lot of
make
them
some
got
stuff for a while.
the government subsidies and stuff to do that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
they did. They got subsidies to do it, and then they became, not profitable for whatever reason or something and get shut down.
Yeah.
And so basically, the kind of the moral of the story is you can buy cheap solar panels, and that's not a problem, but don't expect the company to be around to honor the warranty on them. Because, they put like a
Ah,
20 or
okay.
30-year warranty on these things.
Right.
I mean, you might as well just buy the cheaper panels and just disregard the warranty, I guess, is my kind of
Yeah.
thing. Because there's good chance, when 10, 15 years from now, that company is not even going to be in business anymore.
Well,
Because it
actually,
is,
some of these really cheap panels, like this guy Will Prouse I follow online, he has demonstrated that some of these cheaper panels actually have better performance than some of the really high end panels.
oh yeah, they do. I mean, a lot of it has to do with not only the cells that they put in them, but the the coating material, whether it's plastic or glass or how thick it is. I mean, all that stuff, can matter, can play into it. But at the end of the day, every panel is supposed to be. I say supposed to be because who's really checking over their shoulder? But every panel is supposed to be tested to the same test conditions. They call it STC or standard test conditions, which
Yeah.
is a thousand watts per meter, solar lighting at 1.5 air mass, which is a kind of technical thing that basically describes the spectrum of the sun that you would get kind of mid afternoon, and
Okay.
a temperature of 25 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
So in real world conditions, of course, you're never gonna well, I say never. You're almost never going to achieve standard test conditions in the real
Yeah.
world. It's usually going to be a little bit worse than that.
Yeah.
But know that when it says that they're testing it'll say 250 watt panel at STC or whatever. So it means that that panel was tested at the factory under standard test conditions, and it was able to produce 250 watts. So basically,
Yeah.
you should be able to compare your panels apples to apples, basically, when you're looking at it in that regard. A 250 watt panel is a 250 watt panel. It
Yeah.
doesn't, the efficiency doesn't really matter, because you can have a less efficient panel, and if it's less efficient and it's still a 250 watt panel, it just means it's going to be bigger. It might be physically larger because they had to make the cells bigger to generate that amount of power.
I
But it's
gotcha.
still going to give you the same, 250 watts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you're shopping around for panels, then you can, if it says 250 watts, you're going to get a 250 watt panel, but it may be larger or smaller depending on how actually efficient it
yeah,
is
how
at gathering
efficient
the
they
sun.
manufactured the cells. Yep.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean that's one thing to that was a really cool that was a really great uh thing that you revealed there. That's something that's maybe not a lot of people know about these things.
So, I mean, if you're shopping for panels, really the main thing you want to look at is just price per watts.
Yeah.
So if you're buying, a lot of people will go to Harbor Freight and get this little kit that they have. I think it's maybe
Yeah.
like a couple $100 or whatever.
Yeah,
Well, the
pretty
thing only
much
comes with
lays
like
everything
a
out
40.
for you.
It comes with like a 40-watt solar panel or something like that. When you
Yeah.
break it down for how many dollars per watt, are you paying? Like, you're paying like basically several, like $3 or $4 per watt to get that little bit of power that thing's going to make. It's like you could have bought, a real full size solar panel for
Yeah.
usually less than $1 per watt now. When I first started buying,
Yeah, you
I was
can.
paying about $1 per watt, and now it's like 50 cents per watt, because you got so much cheap
Yeah.
stuff coming in from China. And you and I have used some of those cheap panels that we got from China, and honestly, like I think you say, some of them, I think they're better quality than some of the ones that were made here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, some are, yeah. And there it's going down even further if you can we were buying some panels in bulk, and I think the first ones that we bought, it was like we ordered 8 panels from these people out in I think it was out in Nevada or something like that, and that I think we paid probably about 63 cents a watt or something like that for those things, and now they've come down even further. I was seeing some deals from the same guys for like some of the highest rated efficiency panels out there from Sun Power, I believe is the name of the company. And they were like, probably 40 cents a watt or something like that if you bought them as a pallet. So,
yeah, and like most of the costs are just wrapped up in shipping and stuff. It's
yeah.
not, and that's why I was trying to get them local when I started out, because I didn't have really a whole lot of money to like just like dump like thousands of dollars into it. I was just like, okay, let me get a few and like start testing this and see how this is gonna go. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, if I'm buying 4 panels, so if I'm gonna spend $1,000 on panels, I don't want to spend $500 on shipping.
Right.
Which is what you'll pay, but it's kind of because they have to ship on freight. Usually they'll come on a
Yeah.
pallet, so it's
Yep.
like you don't really incur any more cost by buying more, as long as they can all fit on that pallet. So you
Right.
can get, one panel ships for the same price
Yeah.
as 10 or 12 in most cases. So
Right.
that's really, buy in bulk, I guess, is the moral if you're going to order online.
Yeah, and get maybe like 2 or 3 people together that you may be interested in solar and getting a little project started. And if you have at least 2 or 3 people that are interested, you can part those panels out to each other, and then if you still got some left over, you can sell them locally. I was able to sell them on Facebook Marketplace and put an ad up, and it didn't take me too long to sell the rest of the panels that I had from the bulk orders. So,
Yeah, I mean, right, because there's people out there that want it, but they get discouraged when they go online and be like, because a lot of people do just want to play with it and see, like, because once they just want to make sure it's going to work, you know, and see, like, is this actually going to do anything? Because they have
yeah,
no experience with it. And so they want to go out there and, like, yeah, I mean, it might be a big investment for them to go out there and buy even one panel. It's like, okay, I'm going to spend $100 on this, and they're ready to do that. And they go online and see, like, well, it's $100 panel and it's going to cost me, you know, $150 or $200 for shipping. You know, that just kind of kills it right there. And they're like, never mind. And they just never even try to do it just because of that.
yeah,
So,
right. Yeah, that's a lot of the big thing that I ran into when I was selling those locally was that yeah, just like you're saying, yeah, people were either had a really small like thing that they needed to power. Maybe they were starting an off-grid cabin. Maybe they wanted to just power their refrigerator to try it out, just like you're saying, and they just wanted to. If there was some panels they could pick up locally, then they'd go for it. So yeah,
well, right. And I think a lot of people want, you know, they want to start out with a small system just to experiment with because they don't trust it, honestly.
yeah,
You know, I think a lot of people are like, well, you know, let's just try this and see. Because they kind of are skeptical about if it's really going to, you know, do what they need it to do. And I think for me, I got past it real fast because it's like I didn't have any other option in my case. It was like, this is going to work or I'm not going to have power. So I'm going to make it
yeah.
work.
That's what it means. That has a lot of different meaning if it comes down to that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you have all those.
But
So you have those.
back to if you want me to get back to specs on my system. So we've got,
Yeah,
I mean, basically, you know, it's about 5,000 watts of solar hooked up. I mean, it's actually a little bit more, but just because some of the numbers are kind of weird on different wattages
yeah.
on the panels, and just, I mean, just as a general rule for your listeners, when you're hooking up multiple strings of panels, you know, you want each series string that you have set up in parallel. Each one of those, you should try to get it to be about the same voltage.
Okay.
But as far as all the panels that are in series, they can be different voltage panels as long as they're capable of handling the same amount of like current. Because you don't
Okay.
want one panel that's going to current limit. So usually, almost all panels will handle. They're about 8 watt, or I'm sorry, like 8 amps max, like 8 or 9 amps max, and then it's usually just the voltages that differ because you have I think you have like, what are they now, like 64 and 72 module panels.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that, you know, that gives you either like a 36 volts or like 48 volts or something like that. Maybe
Uh-huh.
36 or 42. I don't know, but
It's
the voltages
48,
tend to
I think, for
differ.
the 72 cell, and then it's 36 for the 60. I think they're 60 cell.
Yeah, 60. So you can absolutely mix those together. Some people will tell you to stay away from it. It just takes a little bit of extra planning and making sure that you get all of your string sizes kind of matched in terms of voltage,
Okay.
and then make sure there's. I mean, which you shouldn't have a problem with the current limiting unless you're running like some really small, weird sized panel. But if you have either a 60 or a 72 cell panel, I mean, pretty much all of those are like 8 or 9 amp panels, you know. So you
Okay.
don't really have anything to worry about putting those in series together
Yeah.
because it's gonna handle the same amperage going through there. You just want to make sure that all of your parallel strings come out to about the same voltage. And if they're not exactly, if it's like a couple of volts off, like honestly, it doesn't really matter that much. Like you can still hook them up
Okay.
and it'll still work.
Okay. So yeah,
But
you have these
it's
four strings that are all connected in series, but then they come together and they connect all those strings connect in parallel coming back to your charge controller?
Yeah, we've got five strings of 4. So what I mean by that is
Okay.
there's actually 4 panels in series,
Oh, okay.
and I have 5 strings of those. So it's 4 parallel times 5, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
And it's always, I think, because the panels are getting so cheap now, it's like just oversize your system.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
never gonna. You're talking about. I was like, oh, it's a 5 kilowatt system and stuff. It's like, yeah, but
That's
it's
on a perfect
Alabama,
day, right? That's on a perfect
Like,
day too.
yeah, and you know how many perfect days we have? Like,
Yeah.
there's not any perfect days here, basically,
Yeah.
because honestly, you'll almost never uh, reach or exceed the STC test conditions.
Right.
I mean, I see my array. It's a 5,000 watt array more or less, and I see it put out about 3,000 watts.
Yep.
On a good sunny day, like yeah, you're peaking over 3,000. But have I ever got close to 5,000? No.
Right. Yeah.
So that sticker is just kind of a number, So if you really
It's
want to
the
achieve 5,000 watts, yeah.
it's the perfect day numbers. It's so you're, and like you said, you're never going to get the perfect conditions. So
Yeah, and that's neglecting line loss and everything else, because none of your equipment's going to be 100% efficient and stuff. You're always going to have losses. So that's something else you always just want to think about and kind of factor in. And like the easiest way to deal with that, like if you absolutely know, like I'm going to need this much power, like I need my PV array to be this big. Okay, well you really should make it at least a little bit bigger than that, because it's not really that hard to just oversize it. Because I mean, if you make too much power, that's not going to hurt you. But if you don't make enough power, then you're going to be like, what do I need to turn off today? So
yeah. Yep. Yeah. I'm figuring that out right now. Being off grid with my solar power system. I have like probably one. I have 1,980 watts of panels, but I'm definitely not getting that amount uh, during the day, and so I have to be somewhat conservative on how I use my power. So
now, as far as my batteries, I've got 16 lead acid golf cart batteries. So
okay,
I think they're 215 amp hour batteries, and they're 6 volt batteries. And really, the only reason I even went with those is because just affordability at the time, because I didn't have like a ton of money to sink into it. So I
yeah,
went to batteries plus, and
they're
I was
super
like,
cheap.
yeah, they are. The golf cart batteries are pretty widely available. I mean, there's stuff out there that's built especially for people running solar power stuff, but I mean they're
Yeah.
just expensive, and you're not really gonna find them at Walmart or Batteries Plus.
Yep.
So this was basically the cheapest thing that they had that was a deep cycle type battery. So I was like, okay, I mean, and it works. There's better stuff out there, but if you're on a budget, I mean, the problem with lead acid is they don't necessarily last as long as some of the other chemistries. Although, I've been running these for almost 5 years now, and they're still going. So
Yeah.
I definitely can tell they've lost a little bit of capacity, but I mean, they got me through the summer this summer, and this is on year 5 basically. So I mean, they're not all that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard there's you got to do some maintenance with those, right? Probably like what do they suggest? Like every 90 days to add a little bit of distilled water to them or something.
Yeah, you gotta make sure the water gets filled up, because they do bubble off a lot of the water. I mean, some
Yeah,
of it evaporates, but
they all
what
cast
really
hydrogen, right?
what really makes most of the water go away is the electrolysis inside the battery. Because in
Right.
order for a lead acid battery to reach an optimal level of charge, you actually have to overcharge the battery a little bit. So the nominal voltage on it is like 12.7 when it's fully charged, but the float voltage that your charger will maintain it at is always above that. It's usually like 13.8, and there's even
Yeah.
Your charge controller will take a 12-volt battery up to when they call it a I can't think what is it called, the cycle when it equalize. So for lead acid batteries, you're supposed to run an equalization charge. Some people run it more often than others, but usually they recommend about once per month you run an equalization charge.
Okay.
And that's to make sure that every cell within that battery bank is brought up to a full level of charge. Because what can happen is that some of the cells will get fully charged and some of them won't. So it's basically a forced overcharge. And so whenever you're charging a lead acid, or at least a flooded lead acid battery above its nominal voltage, all that extra power basically is going to
Goes
go
into electrolysis, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much goes into electrolysis. Once you get about 2 volts over the optimal voltage, you start creating electrolysis. So like
Gotcha.
really even on your just regular float voltage, I think it does a little bit, but during the bulk charging and stuff, definitely, or in the absorb phase for lead acid is what they call it.
Yeah.
So the absorb phase usually will take it up to a higher voltage, and then also if you ever do an equalize charge, that takes it way above the float voltage as well. Because I think for water, and you can go look this up, but the dissociation energy for a water molecule is like 1.8 electron volts or something like that, or it might be 2. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 electron volts. So basically, when you get like 2 volts, it only takes about 2 volts to split water molecules.
It's
Basically,
gonna
moral of
start
the story.
breaking the bonds at that charge level.
So that's what happens to your water inside your lead acid batteries over time. That's why you do have to fill them. It's not that frequently. I mean, honestly, we probably go about every 2 or 3 months. Make sure you fill them up all the way. But definitely
Okay.
by the time that you go back in 3 months and check it again, if you wait that long, they're gonna be getting pretty low.
Yeah.
And you don't want it to get down below the actual plates because it can start to damage your battery when you let it go too long.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
And one thing I do prefer the flooded lead acid to the AGM, the sealed AGM style, because actually I had an AGM, or I've had a couple of them, and it always seems like the problem with the AGMs is that once they're gone, like they're gone, you can't bring them back, because even though people say like, oh, well, they don't really have, get electrolysis or whatever, like,
Yeah.
I think, okay, that's bull crap, because they do get dried out. They dry out, the cells get dried out, and you cannot add more water to them. So even though it's sealed, and there's supposed to be no way for the water to get out, the glass mat still dries out. And once they're dried out, basically they're useless at that point. They can't hold a charge. And I've seen videos where people basically try to break their battery open and try to like drip water into them, and it's kind of a convoluted process at best with mediocre results. So yeah, there are ways you can try to bring a glass mat battery back, but I mean, in my experience, like once they're dead, like they're just dead.
Yeah, the big advantage I see with those is if you are in a van or an RV or something like that, you don't want to have the wet cell batteries in those kind of conditions because of the off gassing in those vehicles, because you need a ventilated area or somewhere like that to have those batteries in, and so that's the main advantage I see with the AGM style or the sealed lead acid style. When we're talking lead acid, but there's a lot of other battery chemistries out there now that are even better for those type of applications. And I know you got into some recently, didn't you?
Yeah. So my next system that I build, I'll carry over a lot of the components, but when I get ready to replace the battery bank, I'm planning to go to lithium iron phosphate. And
Okay.
there's several different lithium chemistries out there right now, and the big one that people normally think about is lithium ion.
Yeah.
Uh, so lithium ion is like the 18650 cells that come in laptop batteries, and that those cells are actually what's in they're in the Tesla power walls, and they're in uh, basically most of the electric vehicles and stuff now. They're also in LG Chem makes a home battery that's competing with Tesla, and they use the same kind of cells. So lithium ion, while it is the most energy dense, it's also one of the most fragile chemistries. So basically, it's easy to damage the batteries if they ever get into an overcharged state or an excessively discharged state. And they're also one of the most volatile chemistries.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like a couple of those like Tesla cars and stuff is basically like they've caught on fire and they can't put them out.
Yeah. You were telling
So
that story this last weekend. Yeah.
it's a little bit. Well, actually, no. It was Jeff, the guy from he was talking about. That's what reminded me of it, or not? Was it Jeff? What's the guy's name?
Yeah.
He said
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
works fire. He works at the fire suppression for the power company.
Yeah.
But they said they had it was basically one of these like big industrial sized batteries. Like if you imagine like a whole like Connex box full of battery packs that's
Yeah.
going to supply like an entire neighborhood, like for basically just for a few minutes if the grid ever goes down.
Yeah.
So think of it like an uninterruptible power supply for your neighborhood, basically. Well, it was one of these things packed full of lithium batteries, like pretty much exploded and like
Turn
almost killed two guys. So
turn into a fire you can't put out in a freaking
yeah.
giant Connex box. Yeah.
I mean, and but those are kind of isolated situations. I'm not trying
Right.
to like discourage. If you're thinking about doing lithium ion, that's not the main reason I would discourage you from doing it. It's because
Yeah.
it's just honestly, it's still expensive right now.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have the space for it, lead acid right now is really a good bit cheaper than lithium ion, at least as far as like the Tesla and some of those other ones that are out there, unless you're going to build your own, which there's a guy on YouTube. I know, I can't think of his name. I know you know him, and anybody can go
Yeah.
find him. Just like,
Jehu Garcia. Yeah.
yeah. Just Google like do it yourself power wall. There's people out there building their own power walls, but
Yeah.
the problem is that sourcing the 18650 cells, even like when you're buying them new, they're pretty expensive still if you're just even buying like a few battery cells.
Yeah, that's the
But
one thing that Jehu he does state. He says, his power walls are just under the Tesla, or they're a little bit more cost effective than the Tesla power walls. But a lot of it is to deal with: can you maintain your battery system yourself? Do you know how the system works? If you're putting it together and you're DIYing it, you're intimate with the system. Whereas you buy a Tesla Powerwall, if something breaks down with that thing, are you going to be able to fix it? And so that's one of the things that he talks about, and the advantages of
yeah,
Powerwall.
but lithium, or at least lithium ion, it takes a lot more. Yeah, you do have to be more careful with it, and
Yeah,
that's
you
one of
need to
the reasons.
balance the
Like,
cells and everything. You have to make sure the cell voltage chargers, when you're charging the cells, that they're all balanced at the same amount of charge and everything.
so basically, in the worst case, scenario, if you're using lithium ion and something goes terribly wrong, it might burn down your house. But probably the more likely scenario is you'll just ruin your battery bank, which was a big investment to start with, and nobody wants that.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons, like, I'm really looking at the lithium iron phosphate. And I just got some cells in that I ordered. They came straight from the factory in China, so I'm testing those, and they seem like they've got pretty good performance. I had a smaller set of cells that they were used, and I ended up getting those off of eBay, but they worked out well enough that I was like, well, let me maybe try to find some new production of these and see if there's some larger capacity ones out there. And basically, the only place I could find that was selling them was like just coming straight from the factory in China. So I don't know who primarily is buying these or what they're using them for, but they're 3.2 volts. Yeah. I mean, they're pretty heavy too. They weigh probably about 15 pounds a piece. I mean, so it's literally just a giant lithium battery cell. Each one is 3.2 volts, and the ones I got are 240 amp hours.
Wow.
So, and I think I ended up getting them for a price of like, well, I mean, with shipping factored in, they were about like maybe like $160 a piece or whatever. Which, once you break it down to by kilowatt hours, it's less than half of what you would pay for. Well, before that, I was looking at the LG Chem home batteries, and those were about, I think, like about $500 per kilowatt hour is what the price came down to. And they're far cheaper than Tesla is.
Yeah.
But these come out to even less than half of that. I mean, these are only like maybe like $200 per kilowatt hour or something.
Oh, cool.
So, it's comparatively pretty affordable. It's still more expensive than lead acid, but when you figure in the fact that, well, you're getting a lot more depth of discharge, because most people that really treat their lead acid well, that want it to last, 10
you don't
or
go
whatever years.
80% depth of discharge ever or something.
Well, they're not even discharged. Yeah. So, and when you say 80% depth of discharge, what you mean is they're only discharging their battery 20%.
Yeah.
So imagine filling up your gas tank and only driving until it was 3/4 of a tank full and then filling it up again. That's basically how you have to treat lead acid. And that's kind of the really sucky thing about lead acid, is that if you don't treat them that way, they won't last as long.
Right.
So lead acid, whatever the sticker number is, it's like, okay, if you have a 6 or 12 volt battery or whatever, and it has so many amp hours, of course you can multiply that out, figure out what the kilowatt hours would be, but then you really have to like really not even cut that in half, like divide it by like 3 or 4 or 5 if you really want to be careful with them.
Yeah.
And so once you do that, these lithium iron phosphate actually come out to be cheaper than lead acid.
Because you have a not only that, that you can go to.
And the cycle life is a lot longer than what's expected for lead acid, because usually people will tell you for lead acid, like, okay, you've got maybe 300 to 500, full discharge cycles or whatever. And of course that changes depending on how far you discharge the battery. But with lithium iron phosphate, you get for a 90% depth of discharge. So if you discharge it all the way down to basically almost completely dead, and recharge it back up all the way, they're saying over 5,000 cycles.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, if you're only doing that once a day, 5,000 cycles divided by 360, I mean, I don't know. Usually, most places are warranting these batteries for 10 years.
Yeah.
But under ideal conditions, it's too soon to say, honestly. But it seems like to me, it's like, 5,000 cycles, you could get like 20 years out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. That's one of these companies that I got my smart inverter system, the Solarc system from. They're putting out. I think they're putting out a lithium iron phosphate battery system, and they're guaranteeing it. They're warranting it for 25 years. So, as long as you use it with their system, and so it's I think that chemistry is the way to go.
Yeah, so it's not quite as compact as lithium ion, but it is. I think the longevity of it is there. It's right on par, and it's looking like it's getting cheaper. I think it's actually going to end up being cheaper than lithium ion, once we start finding good ways to source this, even if we have to order it straight from China.
Yeah.
And the safety factor is there, not only in the regards of it's a more durable chemistry because it's not as prone to overcharge. So one of the really nice things about it is that you can take 3 lithium iron phosphate cells and basically you have a direct replacement for a lead acid battery, because it will charge in the same, you can pretty much use all the same charging hardware that you would normally use for a lead acid battery. And in fact, I got a lithium iron phosphate battery to go in my motorcycle, and it's just a direct replacement. And the thing, it weighs like, the battery, I mean, it feels like in your hand, like you can throw it like up in the air and catch it, you know? I mean, it feels like it weighs maybe 2 or 3 pounds, whereas the equivalent lead acid battery that was in that bike before, I mean, it's not a full-size car battery, but it weighed a good, you know, like 20 or 25 pounds at least, because it was full of lead. And it feels like, oh, there's nothing in this thing. It's just an empty plastic box, you know? But it actually has more energy storage capacity than the equivalent lead acid. And the other good thing is that, especially for automobile use, they don't suffer from the self-discharge that lead acid has. Because, you know, if you have a lead acid battery in your car or whatever, if you leave it sitting for a few months, you're going to be jumping it off next time you go, And then, of course, the longer it sits that way, it damages the battery because you get sulfation and stuff. These batteries don't really, I would assume that they have a little bit of, but they can go, you know, probably years without self-discharging. They have an extremely long shelf life compared to lead acid. So that's one of the other good things about the chemistry.
Yeah. It's an exciting battery technology, the lithium iron phosphates. I've been looking into them myself and comparing the different batteries and stuff. So,
and one of the other names, one of the other names that you'll see this called, sometimes you'll see it called prismatic cells or lithium iron prismatic cells. And they're usually these big, you know, these big flat cells that you can buy. So, I mean, if any of your listeners are interested, you know, either Google lithium iron phosphate. So usually that's abbreviated LiFePO4 for lithium iron phosphate as the chemical name, or you can also try searching for lithium prismatic cells. And I'm pretty sure all the ones that they're describing as prismatic that's actually a lithium iron phosphate chemistry.
Okay.
So usually those are like the big, like flat looking ones, and they'll come in like 3.2 volt cells.
Okay. Cool. So, we kind of covered the solar and the batteries. Is there like a specific type of charge controller you like using? Is there a company that you like that has a charge controller system that you really like?
Yeah, I like Midnight Solar. That's what I've been using.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of all the reasons that I chose Midnight Solar.
They're made for like marine applications, right? They're made for marine applications, so they have to go through probably some stricter stuff for environment anyway.
Some of them are.
Okay.
The smaller one, I think the Kid, which I had a couple of those, and yeah, they're built for they can be used in marine applications. I think the larger one, the Classic that I have that I'm running now, I've never seen where they advertise it as being for marine application, which that doesn't necessarily mean that you couldn't use it.
Okay.
Use it for that. But I think just for the price and for the features and stuff, because I was looking for an MPPT style charge controller, and I wanted one that would handle a 48 volt battery bank. And this one logs a lot of the data and stuff for you. It has a lot, you know, it has a built-in graphic display and stuff, so it's pretty easy to navigate in there. I don't know. I mean, it just has a lot of good features. Yeah. It's not the cheapest thing out there, but I don't know. I felt like it was, quality and it was going to last a long time. And they come in different. The only thing I would have done different if I had to go back now, because I think their regular classic is it handles strings up to 150 volts, and then they have an intermediate one that handles up to 200 volts, and they have another one that handles up to 250 volts. And I ended up getting the 200 volt one just because you have a little bit decreased ampacity on the 250 volt one.
Okay.
And I was thinking like, well, I might actually, because the 200 is actually capable of charging more watts. It can technically handle more watts than the 250, but I never actually reached that amount of, because I think you can go to like 8,000 watts or something, which I'm not really even getting anywhere close to that. So really it was like, okay, I should have just gotten the 250, because for me, one of my issues is I ended up limiting it to only, at one point I was trying to run 6 panels in series, and I was going like slightly over 200.
Voltage. Okay.
Yeah, so it was getting an over voltage condition, and it wasn't high enough that it was going to damage the inverter, but because it'll if it detects us in an over voltage condition, it'll just like cut itself off basically, and it won't charge until the voltage goes down lower than that.
Yeah,
and
I
so that's
realized
another
that
one of
with
the things like
helping my buddy out with his system, and we hooked or I hooked him up in a way that put it into that, and and he
so
came
yeah,
out
he
there and
was
tested
like
stuff.
10 volts over, and it wasn't doing anything because it
Right.
was basically just going into a safety safety shutdown. Like, okay, it's too high voltage. So normally it won't damage your inverter, but it just means that it won't damage your charge controller. It just means that your string or your batteries are not going to be charging during that time. And what can happen is that in the winter time, when it's colder outside, your batteries, your solar panels, they make a lot more voltage in cold weather than they do in hot weather conditions. So you might set it up in summer thinking like, okay, it's 195 volts, like I'm good, I'm under the my 200 volt limit. And then you get a few months through the year, and it's winter time, and all of a sudden like you're making like 210 volts. So and then now you're not charging, so you either have to go out there and cover up one of your solar panels or disconnect one or something. So basically you always want to make sure that you give yourself, I would say at least like a 10% margin. Yeah.
Okay.
About a 10% margin of whatever the max, the nameplate voltage on it says. So if it says, open circuit voltage of 36 volts or whatever, you still need to add a couple of volts to that for the max situation, because in the cold weather it will get, because like I say, that's under standard test conditions, which is 25 degrees Celsius. It gets a lot colder than 25 degrees Celsius in the winter. It obviously, if it's freezing, that's 0 degrees. So the voltage can increase significantly.
Okay.
I mean, it's not going to double or anything, but I mean, you can get 10 or 20% voltage gain just by lowering the temperature.
Wow. Yeah. So you need to give yourself a fudge factor on your charge controller to factor in for that over voltage condition.
So really, moral of the story is, if I could have gone back, I would have gotten the 250 volt midnight solar.
Gotcha.
Charge controller, just to give myself like a little bit of extra, like, okay, now I can throw a couple more panels. I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal because I just ended up making more runs in parallel instead of having more panels in series. But that is something to think about, and usually it's better to have as many in series as you can, because you'll basically increase efficiency by having higher voltages. Especially if you're running it a long way. I mean, my panels they're not on my roof, they're sitting out in my front yard, and it's running, through the wire into the house, probably about 100, 120 feet maybe. So you do end up getting some line loss from that, a little bit of voltage drop. because of that resistance in your cabling coming inside, especially when you're running a long distance. So it basically becomes more efficient at high voltages. So high voltage and less amperage, you'll get less basically heat losses that way.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's really great information. Yeah, so you got your charge controller, and then when you have your inverter, I know are you using what kind of inverter systems do you prefer? Pure sine and for all your house products and things that you use, or you have anything that you prefer with that?
Yeah, I'm running an Ames. Ames is a good brand. I mean, not to say that there isn't other good stuff out there, but it's one of the, you know, kind of the more, I guess, well known, and they have a good reputation. You know, a lot of people have been using Ames in this
Solar
kind of
stuff.
off grid community, solar stuff for a long time, and they have a good reputation. So that's kind of, and I found one for a pretty decent price when I was shopping, because I mean my main things I wanted was like, okay, it has to be true sine wave, and it has to be 48 volts, and it has to be like at least 5,000 watts.
Yeah.
So basically that was like pretty much the best thing I found. Like I kind of shopped around and found one that I wanted. I think it was actually like an obsolete model where they were changing like one little thing to it or whatever, but I ended up getting like what I thought was a pretty good deal on it at the time. I actually don't remember exactly how much, but
Oh, okay.
I would say definitely when you're shopping for an inverter, you know, the common voltages out there right now are 12, 24, and 48.
Yeah.
If you're doing an off-grid battery system, there's actually some higher voltage ones. A lot of the inverters that people use when they're not running a battery bank, if they're doing a grid tie system, you know, those are either like 400 or 600 volt inverters, because when people are hooking up solar panels to a grid tie system, if they're not going to have a battery backup, you know, it's not uncommon for string voltages to be 600 or 1,000 volts of solar panels that you're hooking up in series. But for an off-grid system where you're charging a battery bank, you know, you're usually going to be a lot lower than that. You're going to be in that kind of, you know, 100 to 200, 250 volt range, depending on your charge controller and what it can handle.
Gotcha.
But most people are going to be charging either a 12, 24, or 48 volt battery bank, and those are the traditional voltages, because basically up until a few years ago, pretty much everyone was using lead acid.
Yep.
So,
and they're all
I mean,
standard 12 volts.
Yep. So 12 volt lead acid battery. The advantages, the 12 volt, if it has any advantages, this is the one advantage, is that it is compatible with your vehicle. So if you want to, you know, put it in a RV or a van, or, you know, even in the trunk of your car, if you really want to do that, you can charge up your battery bank, or actually you really don't even need a battery bank, because you already have a battery in your car if you just want something really small.
You can charge it off the alternator on your car.
Yeah, you can charge it off the alternator on your car. So if you have a day where you're not getting enough sun for whatever reason, you can just hook your car right up to it and charge up your battery bank. And actually, I've seen some people they're taking old car alternators and basically just taking like maybe like a little lawnmower engine or something, and they're making a generator out of it to charge up their battery bank. So that's one of the, I guess, kind of good things about 12 volt is there's a lot of cheap charging apparatuses out there already that are commonly available for your vehicle and whatnot.
Well, yeah, and even I know one of my buddies, Jack Dub, that I used to do the show with, used to be my co-host. That's how his system runs. He runs a 12 volt system, and he uses if it's too cloudy, if it gets too cloudy for a long enough period, he'll just hook up a regular battery charger to a generator, and then have that regular battery charger hooked into his system to replenish his batteries. So,
And so the other kind of thing about that is there's actually some people out there that they're running a battery bank with a power inverter, but they're not using solar to charge it. They're just charging it with a generator.
yeah,
And it's actually a lot more efficient that if you run a generator and you run that generator just on full throttle for a couple hours and get that battery bank charged all the way up, and then cut the generator off until the battery bank goes back down to where it needs to be charged again, as opposed to just running a generator under a light load for an extended period of time. Because when your generator or your car or any gasoline engine is actually most efficient at wide open throttle under a heavy load. So when you're trying to like climb a hill or something and you floor that thing, from a thermodynamics point of view and observing all the laws of physics and stuff, that's when your engine is actually the most efficient. So when you're just cruising down the highway under light load and maintaining a steady speed, your engine is not producing as much work per amount of gasoline as it could be when you're basically flooring it. And that's you can actually figure that out because that's what some of these hypermilers do. Have you ever heard of hypermiling? That's kind of a interesting thing. So basically what these people will do is they will take off, they'll floor their car, get it up to speed, put it in neutral and kill the engine and let it like coast down to a stop basically, and then repeat that process over and over again, which is kind of an inconvenient way to drive if you want to piss everyone off around you. But that's actually the most efficient way to drive your vehicle.
Oh.
So basically, so in essence, when you're running a generator to charge up this battery bank, your battery is going to take as much current as that generator can provide in most cases, and which allows you basically to run it at full load. So the generator is under load, it's running at, basically wide open throttle, and it's generating the most amount of power that it can for that unit of gasoline. And then you're going to store all that power in the battery, deplete it from the battery, as opposed to just having the generator run under the light load. So basically, in essence, you can do that same thing with your car or whatever, just to charge up the battery bank, which some people definitely do. They're living in RVs and stuff like that. They'll crank up the engine, once every day or so or whatever, whenever they need it. Charge up the battery bank to full charge, hop off the batteries, cut the engine off, and live off the batteries. So that is kind of the advantage of 12 volt. And then in those cases, really, you're using solar more to supplement, your energy use.
Right.
But what I recommend for home is that you get, probably right now it's going to be 48 volts. In the future, we'll probably go to 90. Like in the future, we'll probably go to 96 volt systems. But for right now, for what's most commonly available in terms of the power inverters, it's going to be 48 volt sine wave inverters.
Okay.
And the reason why you want a higher voltage battery bank is it's usually more efficient, for one, in terms of cabling, because you're reducing the amount of current that you need to get the same amount of power out, which means that you don't necessarily have to have like a big fat, double zero wire just so you can shove enough current through there, which gets really expensive if you're running it any kind of distance. But more so than that, your charge controller tends to be more efficient at higher voltages, because most charge controllers, if you're buying a smaller, more inexpensive charge controller, like the one I started out with, it was a 30 amp charge controller. And so basically it could handle 12, 24, or 48 volt system, but it was still limited to 30 amps max. So if you say, okay, well, 30 amps times 12 volts, that's like, I think like 468, or I don't know, you can check my math. It's like 400 and something, approximately 500 watts of charging that you can get out of your charge controller. But well, guess what? When you go up to 24 volts, that doubles. It's like 1,000 watts. And when you double that again up to 48 volts, it's like 2,000 watts. So that same charge controller at 30 amps that can only give you 500 watts of charging power at 12 volts is now can suddenly give you 2,000 watts of charging power at 48 volts. So that's one of the really good things about having a higher voltage, both a higher voltage battery bank and the higher voltage inverter to go with that, is that it will make your charge controller more efficient, because most of these charge controllers can handle multiple battery string voltages now. Most of them will do 12, 24, or 48. The one I have will even go up to 96, and it has a good amount of programmability in there. That's what I'm saying. A lot of the charge controllers out there are already designed to handle battery banks up to 96 volts. But the only problem with that is that you probably won't find very many inverters that can go in that voltage range. So I mean, but once people start shifting away from lead acid towards some of these other types of chemistries, that may get more common.
I gotcha. Oh man, that's those are some really great nuggets of knowledge right there, man. So 12 volt battery, 30 amps, that's 360 watts there.
So basically, like your friend bought that Ames inverter, and it was a 24 volt inverter, which, okay, well, 24 is better than 12, but you don't have any of the advantages of running a 12 volt system, and it's also only half as good as getting a 48 volt system. So he had enough batteries that he could have, strung them together into a 48 volt battery bank. But instead, he just doubled them up and made more strings to run a 24 volt inverter. It's like, well, for the same price, you could have gotten the 48 volt inverter. So that's just one of those things that's kind of like,
well, he's brand new to it, so he's
right. It's the ignorance of not knowing, and I went through that same kind of thing, because I started out with a 12 volt system. One, because it was cheaper.
Yeah.
Because you can buy 12 volt parts, stuff real cheap.
Yeah, 12 volt batteries are everywhere.
Then I was like, I need more power. Let me and I stepped up to a 24 volt inverter. Of course, I got that, really cheap off of eBay or something too. I don't think it was from eBay, but it was from, I don't know where it's made. Probably, some Chinese brand. 24 volt inverter. It wasn't true sine wave, but that helped me, supplement my power so that we were making more power. But then I was like, okay, now I'm ready to step up to a big boy inverter finally. And it's like nothing less than a full 48 volt true sine wave will suffice.
Yeah.
So once you get more into it, you'll start realizing that's really kind of, I mean, in a few years from now, that might not even be the end goal. There might be something else. I think we're eventually going to start seeing 96 volt systems being common.
Yeah.
One of the reasons probably that we haven't pushed into that as far as off grid systems go. I think there's some weird stuff maybe like in the National Electric Code that says like, if the system is under like 50 volts or whatever, like it basically becomes a safety factor, like when you're dealing with higher voltage DC, like they don't want,
I gotcha.
You can hook up your own system as long as it's below a certain voltage limit and not have to get, there's different regulations around that and stuff. But that's one of the reasons I think that kind of 50 volt area is kind of like a cutoff area where they don't really want people going above that, because it starts like you're basically dealing with like hazardous voltages at that point. And even 48 can be dangerous if you abuse it. But generally, like if you stay below that, it's not as dangerous to say. You're not dealing with like wall outlet voltages at that point. So
right, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean the big thing, yeah, to be careful on. Always be careful when you're hooking up these systems. When I was first hooking up my first system, 24 volt system, there was some arcing involved when I was first learning how to hook these things up. And, don't ever complete the circuit.
Did you accidentally weld any of your cables together?
Maybe. I don't think I ever got to where they were totally welded together, but
yeah, that's one of those things where a little bit of electronics knowledge goes a long way.
yeah.
But
I'm trained in mechanical engineering, and so my hands-on electronics knowledge was lacking. So, but after you experience a shock, you learn.
well, I think that because it's funny, like that goes back to a lot of the kids like getting out of school and stuff. Actually, it's like because I've been working as a engineering technician for so many years, and I've worked on so many things and like dealt with real life circuits and stuff. And it's like, they come in like, oh, I'm an engineer. Like they don't know anything. It's like they've never worked on anything.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a big
so
problem.
That's one of the like other things like school like to me is kind of a scam. But
oh yeah, I think now it has become a scam. It's everybody's been told that you have to go to college to make it in the world, but that's not the case now. It's like there's so many people that just don't have real world skills. I think it's more about having the real world skills and developing yourself through these kind of trial and error experiences. Getting out there, trying to be an entrepreneur and trying something. I think it's way more valuable than going and getting a college education now, in my opinion.
In a lot of ways, it is, and it does take that kind of real world experience and practice to cultivate these kind of skills. There's not something that really
you can't learn it in a book. You can't read about it.
You can learn enough to get started. You can learn enough to get started, and that's what you really need to do. Because taking that first step and getting over the fear of doing it yourself, that's kind of the most challenging and most important part, like we were saying in the beginning. Like once you get past that and realize like, well, I set up one system, it wasn't perfect, but it worked a little bit.
Yep.
What can I do better next time? It didn't explode. That kind of gives you the confidence to go forward and to learn more and to do
that next
bigger,
project
better things.
And yep, go bigger, go better the next time. Yep, that's the big thing that I like to preach on the show is that growth mindset, and not to be afraid to get out there and to try something, even though you may fail. But I think that's a really important part of being here as a human being, is that we grow and try to continuously learn and grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I'm trying to learn every day. Like you were talking about, earlier as far as the television programming and stuff. I don't even watch TV. I haven't watched a regular TV show in probably like several years. Pretty much all I watch is stuff on like YouTube. Like if it's not educational in some way, like I don't really have a whole lot of interest in watching it. But there's so much entertaining educational stuff that you can pull, just off of YouTube. Like you'll learn so much more from that and going and seeing what other people are actually doing and working on and stuff And just like your videos and things that you're making with your like Tinker Tribe stuff, you know, you can learn like so much more from that. And that's all free content that's out there than you would in college most of the time, which is unfortunate because it's so expensive just to get a stupid piece of paper.
Yeah. Yeah, man. That's it's something that is just I think that if we embrace that growth mindset, then and we're not afraid to go out there and try something, that we're going to continue to gain more and more knowledge and actually be able to create so much abundance that it's going to look like it's foolish to keep staying in that same old system and keep doing things the same way and expecting different results, which is what I would call insanity. So
Well, right. And, you know, a lot of it is just it's false scarcity.
yeah. I mean, just all the little things that I've done, and I mean, we talked about it earlier in the show, is that it's so empowering to do these things, and then once you've done them, you gain so much more confidence in the world that it's just what else what's the next boundary that I can cross, and what's the next thing
It's just, right. It's just like going out into the world, like knowing, like, you know, problems are gonna happen, but that's okay because I can deal with it.
right.
You know, like you start, especially, you know, even if something goes wrong with your system or whatever, and then you fix it, and it's like, you know what, I dealt with that. I handled that like a boss. You know, I fixed that. You know, it really does give you that kind of like confidence just to feel like, you know, the world can't keep me down. Like I can deal with it. You know, whatever they can dish out, like I can find a way to handle this
Yep.
because, you know, I'm a man and I can provide for my own needs and, you know, make my own way in this world. And that's basically kind of the idea, like, of the homesteading stuff, and like really a lot of the lifestyle of what we're trying to do is like, I don't want someone else trying to not only have control over me, but to provide for me. Because if someone else is providing for you, then they really do have control over
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
there's, I think it was, not Henry David Thoreau, but actually it might have been Thoreau. It was kind of one of the famous. I know it may have been Emerson. One of the famous pieces he wrote called "Self-Reliance," and one of the lines in there, it basically says like, "What is a man? A man is self-reliant."
Yeah.
And I kind
Yeah.
of always thought that was a really interesting definition of like what is masculinity and what is a man in terms of like being self-reliant. And
Yeah.
like I really feel like there's, like you said, it is such an empowering feeling. Like once you realize that you can actually be self-reliant and you can provide, you know, for all these needs that you know, socially we're supposed to let the government or the, you know, utility company, whoever, provide for us. And when you're providing those things for yourself, it is such an empowering just feeling, and that's like the only way really I can describe it.
Amen, brother. Amen. So, saying that, kind of coming up to the end of the time allotted for for the podcast. So, maybe if there's anything that you want to plug for the end of the show, or any last comments that you want to make before we leave the audience here.
No, man, I think that's about it. I mean, you know, I'm working on getting my company set up, Red Rocket Solar. So
Yep.
we'll be trying to help out people in the Huntsville area get solar systems set up. So, you know, if anybody in the area is interested, we got a website. It'll be launching pretty soon, redrocketsolar.com. And
Okay.
of course, you'll be able to, you know, reach out and contact us. And yeah, I would love to give people, you know, basically free consultations to figure out how they can live the kind of lifestyle that we're living and feel this wonderful, empowered feeling that we are feeling.
Awesome, brother. Awesome. And man, I really appreciate you taking the time out to come on the podcast with me. And I hope to have work with you. I know we're going to be working. I'm all in on helping out with the launch of Red Rocket Solar in your business, and then I hope that we can team up and do some hands-on workshops too on my land. And
Yeah, I think that would be great.
awesome. Well, thank you so much, brother, and I really appreciate your time again, and I hope you have a great one. And we'll see each other this weekend because there's some kind of cool event thing that's happening that you got going on, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's the actually part of the national solar tour, but there's a community of homes here where it's 5 houses like all together, and all of them are off grid, completely 100% solar and generating their own water and stuff. And each one of these houses, it has like unique design features. They're all designed specifically to use passive solar technology and basically elements of the environment to their advantage, such as what time of year the sun is incident on which parts of the house. One of them I know is like built either mostly or completely underground. One of the houses actually uses wheat straw bales as insulation.
Yeah.
It's like packed into the walls. It's like one of them is a yurt. I don't know. It's like they all have like neat little quirky things about them that basically are just design features meant to maximize the sustainability of the house. So yeah, that'll be interesting to go to. And the other really neat thing about that is it's a community of people. So that increases the sustainability of it right there, because you have a group of like-minded individuals all together, basically supporting each other, when they need help and stuff. They're all kind of focused on the similar type of goal.
Yeah, I'm super excited to go, and that's if you guys are hearing this, this is a recorded show, and that I'm putting up for the live Saturday show. So I appreciate you guys tuning into the podcast every week, and I'll be back again next week with a live show and another show for the Meadows and Makers podcast. So thanks for everybody that joins in and listens every week. I really appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you next time. So, peace.